This podcast is powered by the Digital SME Alliance. The Digital SME Summit lands at the European Economic and Social Committee in Brussels on December 10th. The all-day event will highlight topics on AI, sustainability, standardization, digital skills, and more. For tech companies, a unique matchmaking session awaits you to connect, network, and partner with peer European innovators.
Today in the EU, Operation Interflex, BTS from Ukrainian soldiers training abroad. In the past 2 weeks, Russian forces have achieved the fastest breakthrough in eastern Ukraine since the beginning of the invasion. The Ukrainian army is in dire need of new recruits and equipment, and hundreds of soldiers are under special training as part of Operation Interflex. To deal with the crisis, hundreds of soldiers are under special training as part of Operation Interflex, aimed at providing them with vital skills to manage death-threatening situations. What is the operation like, and how can this training impact Ukrainian troops' success on the front lines? Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Giada Santana, and this is Today in the EU.
We're walking in this pretend town, surrounded by rubble and coming from the buildings. You can tell there's been a fight. It's not just constructions that fell down. It looks like any town you'd imagine that has gone through a battle. People speak English. That's the only thing that reminds you you're not actually in a combat zone. And the big cameras on the walls. We're walking to a training center.
Today, I'm joined in the studio by defense reporter Aurélie Pugnet to talk about what she discovered during a trip on the ground. Hi, Aurélie.
Hi, Giada.
So you were in the UK this week to report on the training of Ukrainian soldiers under Operation Interflex. What was it like?
It was something very powerful to witness. I spent 2 days with Ukrainian soldiers, some who had already been on the front line, some who hadn't. And these people were going through training to learn basically how to shoot, how to kill, how to defend themselves, how to clear buildings, everything that a basic soldier needs to do. So we're talking entry level, really training. So I saw them go through training and then also spent hours with them just before they were leaving the UK. So on their last night in the UK, just before they returned to Ukraine at the end of their training. It was something very, very, very interesting, very powerful to witness, because I think most times when reporters go to training sites to meet with soldiers that are going through training, they're not being deployed the next day on the front line. They are going through training, which is a regular thing to do. They are preparing for an attack, but it's not the same mindset. And definitely for me, it did not feel the same. You could feel the gravity of the situation and how serious and how focused everyone was.
And tell us a bit more. What kind of training do these soldiers need? What type of training is it?
So Operation Interflex offers several types of training. So it's an operation that is led by the UK, but is also working with other partner nations. The most important one, or the one that most soldiers have benefited, is what we call basing infantry training. So in Ukraine, a lot of the fights are happening around or within cities. So you need to know how to walk around or walk through a town, a building, a store, and knowing how to spot an enemy and how to stay safe while doing it, and also, be able to shoot and kill. So they're learning how to survive, how to be in the best shape possible, and they learn, obviously, how to understand commands, how to give commands as well. They're also training a lot of commanders, because you do need a chain of command in the army. It's not just people you send on the ground and they do whatever they want. So there's also a whole course on that. And we've seen also a lot of people telling us about medical training that they would be given, so to become medics on the ground. And these are very important people as well.
And you've seen some of the training sessions, right? How was it for you?
It felt very real. When you witness a training as a reporter, you go and, for example, in this example, we were in a town, so you have to imagine rubbles everywhere. So you're walking through this town that looks like a ghost town. You see buildings that look like they're empty, but maybe they're not. There could be someone hiding in them. There could be someone. There could be snipers on the roofs. You just don't know. There could be mines under your feet. So you have to imagine you're walking through this town, and then all of a sudden shooting starts. And it feels quite real to see Ukrainians basically repeating what they're going to have to do in a few weeks. It's not like, oh, well, they train and then in a couple of weeks they can go back to their own beds and it's a nice and happy life. It's their training to survive, and they get 5 weeks of training, most of them. It's very little compared to what a regular Western soldier would get, which is usually more of a 6 month training. But in reality, what they say is that it's all about repetition. So if you can pack everything in those 5 weeks, it's going to be helpful. And compared to training, for example, that could be happening in Ukraine, where there's a lack of ammunition and maybe a lack of instructors, and they're more in a rush. Out here in Europe, or at least in the UK, there's time to try again, and you can make a mistake. It is fine. You can learn how to enter a building, and if you get shot, well, you won't die this time. But you know that in a couple of weeks, those people will be on the front line, and especially seeing the soldiers just on their last night before they return. So the last night, they arrive at the center, they get their identity check, they get their bags, so they get all their gear, all their kit, the backpack with, everything, the mattress, the gloves, the boots, the shampoo, the everything you can imagine that is in a kit. And they take this and then sleep in a bunk bed, and the next day off they go. Basically, you know that within 7 days, they'll be in Donetsk, they could be in Luhansk, they could be in Kharkiv, they could be anywhere.
More right after the ad.
This podcast is powered by the Digital SME Alliance. The Digital SME Summit lands at the European Economic and Social Committee in Brussels on December 10th. The all-day event will highlight topics on AI, sustainability, standardization, digital skills, and more. For tech companies, a unique matchmaking session awaits you to connect, network, and partner with peer European innovators.
The stakes are incredibly high, I can only imagine. And you've talked to some of the soldiers on the base. How are they feeling about the future of the war? How do they feel about returning home on that last day?
You could think that those people would be really feeling down, but the people I talked to, at least, they were very motivated. You could feel that they knew that they were here to do a job and that it was a matter of survival, isn't it? And those people, they were not necessarily in the army before the war. I talked to someone who was in IT. I talked to someone who was doing something completely different as well. And when you see the guys, they don't look like your regular soldiers that you imagine your GI Joe, like they're not the super fit guys like you see in Top Gun. They are normal people. They're like my dad. And I think this was very powerful. But then to think that they say themselves, and this is also something that we heard a lot from the British, is you need to stay motivated. You need to keep your morale up, because then when you are in the trenches, when you are, again, like in the middle of the fight, if you're trying to feel down, if you're starting to feel down, if you're starting to feel stressed, you need to know how to cope with it. Because if you're stressed, you are more likely to make a mistake. You are more likely, obviously, to get killed. And the people that are here, it's people that have been recruited by the Ukrainians that for conscriptions, for example. It's not necessarily people that wanted to be in the army, but they know this is what they have to do. And they all said, that's what we have to do for the survival of our country, our family. And a few of them were saying, oh, I haven't had a day off in 2.5 years. And they were saying, I can't wait to just get one day, one weekend. And then when I was asking them if you could take it tomorrow, would you take it? And they were saying, no, the Russians are still fighting. Why would I take my day off?
Yeah, it absolutely is, especially when we think of a war that's more than 3.5 years in the making, and where, with elections, things are changing very quickly. I'm sure Ukrainians are very aware of that. And so they go through this 5-week training, and I'm assuming there's soldiers that, after this training is going to be their first time joining the war. So how is the success of the training then evaluated? How does it work?
What we were explained or what we understood, or I understood, is so basically there's different ways. First of all, there's a communication with Kiev. Because there's Ukrainians here on the ground as well in the UK, so that they create the liaison, and so they tell them when they need something different, when they need to adapt the training, something like this. So that's always one bit. So if something doesn't work, they know they have to change it. But there's also just soldiers that are in the UK. When they come in, they say what they expect out of the training, and when they leave, they have an exit interview with their bosses, with their trainers, their instructors, and they say what they could have wanted more of, less of. Maybe if they had already been on a battleground, they can say, okay, well, this doesn't exactly fit the reality as far as I'm concerned, and definitely even throughout the training itself, we were explained that there's a lot of things that the British have to stay aware of because obviously they're not there. They're not on the front end. They're not in the trenches. So you have to have also the Ukrainians giving immediate feedback, and it happened throughout the training sessions as well. And in terms of success, I mean, the best way, I guess, to gauge success in that situation is, are maybe the Ukrainians holding the line? Are they advancing? From my perspective, this is maybe how I would measure it, but definitely for them, it's also a matter of immediate evaluation is, okay, have you done a lot of progress between the first and the last day? And definitely everyone I talked to was saying the change in someone who has just arrived on their first day, on day one, and on the 30-something day, it's two worlds. It's people that are completely different. And a lot part of it is also not just shooting, but also giving them, like I was talking about, like this mental resilience and this morale to make sure that they are motivated when they get to the front line.
And you've seen doctors that welcome troops in the military base as well. What is their interaction like with soldiers?
One bit I found very interesting is that doctors, when the Ukrainians come around for the first time, would ask them, obviously, how they're feeling.
It depends where they've come from, which part of Ukraine they've come from. You've got a lot of people from young fighting age fit males who have been in the guard force, all these people that have been doing the job or fighting for a while. And then you've got conscripts that have never done any soldiering that obviously are going to struggle a little bit more than somebody who has been doing it or has been trained already.
And when you say it depends on where they come from?
Some of them nearer the front line or been under occupation, we tend to find more of the stresses that we see, just from them expressing their stories and what they've seen already. And it's just something that you just listen to them, understand where they've been and what they've been going through, talk to them, see what can we do to help you. And a lot of the times they just need somebody to listen.
It's what you'd expect. It's PTSD, it's just intense anxiety, especially people that were under occupation, because obviously the Ukrainians have liberated some areas over the past 2 years, and people that are now back under Ukrainian authority, let's say, these people have had a lot more stress. So of course it's different. There are questions, obviously, about loyalty, who are you loyal to? They say, of course, when it's people that have been on the ground, that you see a lot of dehydration, malnutrition, alcohol withdrawal, because it helps coping. And obviously, we're in winter, so they have a flu. But they also do actually is that they ask them about whether they've witnessed, for example, war crimes. So have you been subject to, for example, chemical attacks, or did you notice anything that is out of the law of war? And that is really helpful for them to then collect for information. And they do teach them as well a lot about resolve and mental resilience, so that then when they're on the ground, they can cope with the stress, they can stay focused. The three goals from the British operation is survivability, lethability, so be able to kill, and offensive spirits. And to have those three, you need to be absolutely in control of who you are, and you need to know when to take a break, to know how to stay focused. You need to know how to be motivated and remember why you're there and cope when something happens. And obviously, anxiety and stress is normal, but it can be more or less damaging or crucial or an issue, obviously, depending on
How
what we're
much you
doing.
control it, right? It's a great
Exactly.
example in self-discipline that the soldiers are going through. But if we take a step back, is military training making a tangible difference? Like, can we measure it? Ukraine is still in urgent need of ammunition and military equipment as Russia is waging one of its biggest offensives since the start of the invasion.
I think we can say that, yes, it is making a huge difference because, first of all, the Ukrainians want it. So the fact that they are asking for it means that it is necessary. And the Ukrainians are few. They are much fewer than the Russians, especially with the Russians getting support from the North Koreans and others. So if you're fewer, it's no longer about quantity, it's about quality. The Russians, as far as we know, are being trained, or on the Russian side, they're being trained for less than 10 days before they get to the battlefield. Everyone in intelligence says it. It's about really creating this mass that will probably die a lot, but that will make the Ukrainians use up a lot of their ammunition and missiles and everything like this. So it's really about making those Ukrainian soldiers actually capable of holding the fort and regain some ground. And the training within Ukraine doesn't have the best reputation. So there has definitely been, so now more than 50,000 people trained by the British, and the Europeans have trained 75,000. These are big numbers. It can't be everyone, obviously, but when we were looking at the numbers, back in the UK, you could see that people were arriving regularly. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds of people being trained on a regular basis. And if the Ukrainians didn't want that and they didn't think it added value, they probably wouldn't do it.
Thank you, Aurélie.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I'm Giada Santana, and this was Euractiv's Today in the EU podcast. Visit Euractiv to stay on top of the latest news, sign up for our newsletters, and if you haven't subscribed yet, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite streaming platform. Don't forget to leave us a star review. It will really help us spread the word about our work. This podcast was produced by Miriam Sainz de Tejada, Charles Cohen, and I. As part of our commitment to accuracy, inclusion, and transparency, Euractiv is part of the Trust Project.